Welcome to another episode of More Than a Lawyer, the podcast where we celebrate and learn from those unique individuals who are successfully doing more than one thing. I'm your host, London Lewis, and today we have an incredibly inspiring duo with us. Our guests are Dr. Marissiko Wheaton-Greer and Vince Greer. They are a dynamic husband and wife team who met while working together at the Claremont Colleges while serving as diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioners. Dr. Marissiko Wheaton-Greer holds a master's degree in higher education and personal administration from NYU and a PhD in urban education policy from USC. Go Trojans. She started as a generalist in higher education. Then after completing her PhD, she began as an adjunct professor and assistant dean and director in DEI and is now a DEI specialist at a nonprofit. In addition to having co-founded Greer Consultants with her lovely husband, Vince. Marissiko shares her journey as a new mom on social media, where she's developed a following for everything mom and family oriented, including her relationship, her healing journey, and creative endeavors. Vince Greer also obtained his master's in higher education, where he's advanced his career from Assistant Dean of Students and Director of Multicultural Services and DEI, to his current role as Assistant VP of Student Affairs for Diversity and Dialogue. He is also known as DJ Big Mobile, adding another layer to his multifaceted career on the ones and twos. Together, they manage both their professional lives and their personal passions, in addition to their family responsibilities. In today's episode, we are going to learn the secret behind them working together to doing multiple careers successfully and how they find the balance in it all. I mean, we're going to get the apps and all the details. I'm so proud to welcome Dr. Marissiko Wheaton-Greer and Vince Greer to the show. Okay, so that was a mouthful right now. You guys individually are accomplished, and together I'm like, it's like power couple. Okay. But can you both start off by talking about your individual journeys and like how you guys met at Claremont, the college?
The colleges?
The colleges, yeah.
Yeah. Do you want me to start?
Sure, one.
Yeah. I was a student activist in college. I was always really passionate about social justice issues. I love exploring identity. I come from a very sort of unique and diverse background culturally, economically, educationally in terms of my family. Mm-hmm. And I was always really passionate about that stuff. Yeah. And so I decided in college, after a lot of involvements, to pursue a degree in higher education because I wanted to help other people do that. I wanted to help other people find themselves in that journey. Mm-hmm. And then throughout the first few years of my career as a practitioner in higher ed, I really realized that as a Black woman, without a doctorate degree in higher education, I just couldn't see myself really propelling to where I thought I could be without that degree. There's a certain level of legitimacy that I think I felt, unfortunately, that I felt I needed. And so that's why I decided to pursue the PhD. And shortly after pursuing my PhD, I went back to serving as a practitioner, and that is where I met Vince. He actually interviewed. He was on my interview committee.
Oh, Vince! What were like first thoughts? Were you like, "Oh, I'm about to meet my wife," or were you like, "Let me just play it cool"?
Oh, he played it cool.
Yeah, I played it cool because I just wanted to make sure I was professional first and foremost. But the thing is, I knew of her, so we do have a really good mutual friend, and so I had seen Marissiko on IG before. So I was like, oh, who's that? Like many folks did my quick snoop, but that was like years before. Right. So fast forward, and the next thing you know, she's interviewing for this position. So, that was a kind of one of those awesome full circle moments in some ways.
Oh my
what
God.
about
It's
your
kind of
experience?
like meant to be. Like,
Yeah.
when you manifest, you're like, I've seen her. Now I want to meet her.
Right.
For sure. And just in terms of my journey, I'm originally from Chicago, grew up on the South Side. And so a big chunk of my life was in the Midwest.
Okay.
I reflect on my undergrad experience, like Marissiko, was pretty involved in activism and affinity groups on campus, kind of finding the community that I'm most connected with.
Right.
And what I noticed, and it was a very defining moment in my undergrad, was that I had two really good friends at the time. We started our time together, and an administrator said, look to the left and look to the right of you. And on graduation day, they're not going to graduate with you. And I was like, yeah, okay. But unfortunately, both to the left and the right of me, neither one of them graduated, and they happen to be Black men. And for me, that really propelled me into wanting to do this work and doing everything I could in my power to prevent many accomplished, smart, more than capable students across the board, but particularly for marginalized identities, wanted to make sure that they were able to graduate. And so, yeah, that, you fast forward nearly 20 years later and have lived in multiple stops, in the Midwest and on the East Coast. And I made the trek 8 years ago to California. And that really set me on a path to meet Marissiko, and the rest is history.
I love this. Shout out to the fam. So then tell me, okay, you guys were working together at the Claremont colleges. So what made you decide, okay, let's actually work together outside of this as well and create this company, Greer Consultants? Like, that to me is like, I actually want to see and work with you at home as well. I don't know if I want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, that can be a lot for some folks.
Yes.
And we totally recognize it. I think, fortunately, in our case, we just had a really seamless chemistry. And while we didn't work at the same college, our colleges are literally right across the street from one another, or at least at the time.
They're part of the same consortium.
Exactly.
So we worked together sort of inherently because we were both DEI practitioners. And so we were actually partnering on a project, and we had to facilitate some workshops for some folks over the course of a year. And it was just very clear that we had a very easy connection. We just built off of each other. And this is before we started dating, really, that we started doing these facilitations. And so when we started dating, we just jokingly said, oh, yeah, we're going to have to start a business together because this is just too easy.
Right.
And that's how it all started.
Yeah. And the only other thing I would add with that is, there was another person that was on that project with us. And it wasn't as seamless, right? So, we didn't take that for granted.
Shouts out to that person.
Yeah. And there's no shade. It just showed how.
It was just clear what our chemistry was. Yeah.
No, I love that, because when things are meant to be, it's just like organic. It just flows, right? Like, you shouldn't have to work hard at anything if it's meant to be, No, I love that. Okay, so I want to start off with you, Marissiko, like your individual journey. So how do you feel like your transition from higher education to becoming a specialist in DEI and co-founding Greer Consultants, like, how do you feel like that came about? Was it something that, in school you were like, okay, I think I need to be the person of this space? Because like you said, you're from like multifaceted background in terms of like, economically, racially, ethically, all the things. And it's like, you're very vocal and passionate. And so I love that. So I'm just like, were you like, okay, they just need me? Like,
yeah, I love that my foundation is in higher education because it's a developmental space. So I was really able to work with students, faculty, and staff at all different levels of competency as it relates to these issues.
Yeah.
But I think over time, particularly as I was serving as a researcher and scholar, and I began to serve as an advisor and consultant to, college presidents, HR leaders, folks across the board, across many different roles in higher education, I was like, I can do this beyond higher ed. Like, I want to do this in other spaces. I want to be able to stretch myself and learn how to teach and facilitate these issues across many industries. And so that's how I ended up deciding, really making the decision when it was really hard because I grew up in this field. And as you know, when you grow up in a field, your whole network is based in one space. And so it's been hard. I've only been gone from higher ed for a few months, but it's been hard to let go, but it's been also amazing to see how transferable my skills are across the board. And I had already been, because of Greer Consulting and my own experience serving as a consultant, like I had already had that experience working with different different communities and different types of leaders. So now that door just opened and it's been really rewarding.
Oh, that makes sense. And then Vince, I'm curious because you're also a DJ. I'm just like, how are you balancing your role as a DJ and your specialty in like your 9 to 5, like you're an assistant VP. Are you kidding me? How do you do that?
You know, what I've tried to do is integrate both those worlds, to be honest. And so it's not uncommon. It's a point of connection for my students. It gives me a level of credibility as I get older, to be able to relate to musically things that they're rocking to and knowing that, you know, we can have a conversation around that. And so it's not uncommon to see me DJ across campus. So there are many events on campus and, you know, they get to see me in my day-to-day role and then they're vibing to, you know, whatever set I'm doing at any given time.
That's really cool.
So that's been cool. I try to bake it into even like some of the branding where they know like, hey, this is my day-to-day, but outside of that, this is my other world. Right. And so, you know, they get a chance to get a taste of both of those in that sense.
And he's DJ'd for like colleagues' weddings, for students, like birthday party. I mean, it's a great window.
Yeah, for sure. It just allows me in all these different spaces. And so, you know, at any given moment, you're kind of seeing me pop out in this different way, you know.
I love the pop out reference. But can you tell me, so also as your role as assistant VP, let me get it right. So assistant VP of Student Affairs, Diversity and Dialogue. Yes. Can you tell me a little bit about the initiatives you're most proud of?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited about this constructive dialogue initiative that I've had the pleasure of building from the ground up, and it's still very much in construction in some ways and already have been executed in a lot of other ways. And so we think about just the world we're living in right now, our country where, you know, politically in a lot of ways, people are more divided seemingly than ever, maybe not so much, but certainly vocally in those ways. And the irony in that is as vocal as folks are about their opposition, there's not like a lot of opportunities for folks to come together and either find common ground or just agree to disagree and still have a constructive and productive conversation. Right. So as part of that, a big part of it is really equipping our students with the skills to have those conversations from the moment they arrive on campus all the way to they graduate. And these are skills that we're applying in Greer Consulting all the time as well too. So when we're working with clients or we're having partners and clients that are talking about, hey, employees are having difficulties managing this issue. I'm able to pull out some of those same frameworks, same approaches in that space as well. Now, it looks a little different because we're working with younger adult populations in college, but, you know, a lot of these issues don't necessarily go away after you graduate. And sadly. So, you know, where it makes sense, you know, I'm dabbling a little bit of that. And you know, also, you know, we're tapping into many other ways of how we go about doing this work. So again, it's just one of those things that feel a little seamless, but more than ever, you know, thinking about, you know, the pandemic and so many moments where some of our students have been kind of stunning in their communication skills. You would think these would be just innate, and yet it's not. And so we're just really making sure to sharpen those skills for them.
I love that. It's like you guys are actually doing work that's so needed. I'm just like, okay, I can imagine so many people call them, shout them out after the show, guys. Okay, and then Marissiko, so you have become quite the social media talent, and I feel like that's such a good tool. Like on LinkedIn, I always see your posts about, you know, that image that everybody keeps passing around, and you're like, please give me my credit.
That Black women.
Yes, but also like you're a new mom, and you share that journey, and it's like so vulnerable, and I love to see it. So I'm just like, how do you feel like is social media like you use it as a tool or you just feel like organically this is just the place I'd like to, you know, connect with people?
I think it's a mix of both. You know, I feel like social media can be intimidating, right? For many of us because, you know, you're constantly comparing yourself to other people. But I find that I've received the most engagement and the most reward when I'm as authentic as possible and vulnerable. It's hard to be vulnerable, but when I co-created that infographic with my colleague Jen Wells and friend, it was a moment where we were both being vulnerable with each other, sharing our professional experiences, heartbreaking experiences as Black women. And so we created that out of a place of just frustration and sadness for the women in higher education in that industry in particular who have had terrible experiences. And so to see it go viral and see people around, Black women around the globe have this common unifying experience was both rewarding because it's like, wow, it's validating to see so many people have this, but it's also sad to know that it resonated with so many people in such a deep way. And then I think on, you know, on Instagram, when I talk about my experience being a mom, being a wife, my heartbreak, what it meant to lead, the challenges I went through leading up to finding my partner. You know, those things might seem easy for me to share, but a lot of it comes from like a struggle, right? Like a feeling of self-doubt, a feeling of like, am I worthy? Am I good enough? And so to be able to share those rewards and be honest with people about the journey, I found that that's the engagement. That's where the engagement comes from because people see themselves in that.
100%.
So,
I see myself. I'm like, I'm learning something new. I'm like, wait, I've known you basically my whole life, but I'm like, I'm learning something new. So I love that.
Yeah.
And okay, so you guys have been in this industry, like, I mean, it feels like you guys were born to do this work. So I won't even try to like say a number of years, but what do you feel like is the biggest challenge you face as a couple working in the same field? And also, I want to know, what are the emerging trends that you guys see in diversity, equity, and inclusion? Because given the social and the political climate, I'm a little nervous. It's like, you know, it's so needed work, but it's like, are people really valuing the work as much as they should? You know?
Right.
Maybe a really good question.
If I take part one.
Yeah, I'll take
I'm like, because we'll tag team.
Okay, cool.
So, you know, it's interesting. We do the same work, but we're still two different people with two different sets of identities. We obviously have a lot of overlapping identities, but different ones as well. And you can answer this question in multiple ways, but I think that for us, there's a lot that we see. There's a lot that we see that we then end up using in our work. What I mean by that is there's been moments where Vince and I have applied for the same opportunities. Oh, wow. And we see on the back end the sexism, right? Like the bias when it comes to degrees or networks or who you know, right? Literally, there were jobs that we've both applied to where they have told us two different salaries.
What?
And Vince and I pretty much have very similar, you know, backgrounds.
Wow.
Not identical resumes, but very comparative. Our experiences kind of weigh themselves out. And so to get such different reactions and responses, we end up using that as fuel for our work, right? Because then when we're talking to executives about the kind of bias that takes place, we can use our own experience for
Your
that.
case studies.
Yeah, we're case studies.
Teachable moments.
Teachable moments for sure. So I think that we see a lot and we build off of that even in our facilitation and our executive coaching. You know, there's moments where I'm like, they're not going to receive this from me as a woman. They're not going to receive this from me as someone who has a research background, but they'll receive it from him as another, you know, executive leader, you know, top leader, or whatever. So there's moments where we strategically use our identities to help people to hear us, but we also know that it's sad that we have to do that, right?
Right. You have to think first and be strategic instead of just like being yourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah, we try to leverage that as much as possible. And even the same thing with education, like with her having a doctorate in certain spaces, particularly in academia, that is going to be held in a certain regard. And so it's like, how do we leverage those in those moments? And we have this sort of combination of similar experiences and backgrounds that overlap, but also very distinct differences as well too. And so we, at any given moment, we're like pulling that out depending on the audience or whoever we're working with. But when we think about sort of a broader issue around just some of the emerging trends, like, you know, anyone that's been paying attention to the news in the last few years can just kind of see that there's been a systemic attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion. There have been a lot of eliminations of jobs, particularly in higher education, a lot of laws that have been passed in different states across the country to really try to undermine or banish the work. And so we're working against that. You know, there are times where folks are like, oh, is that a dying field or that's not a thing anymore, is it? And so, you know, you have that occasionally. Fortunately, that's not overwhelmingly, but it's still a thing, right? And so we're leading with that. I do think also that what's unique about this sort of work is we're oftentimes having to prove ourselves every time we step in a space because maybe someone hasn't had the best experience with the previous session, for instance, where it was the way it was facilitated, or in our worlds, we say call out versus calling in, right? And so if you've been called out, right, in this way versus being called in, then that can feel really exclusionary. And so sometimes folks are holding on to memories and experiences for 10 and 15 years ago, and I'm like, we don't know those folks and they ain't got nothing to do with us. And yet we hold the weight of that at any given moment until we show that we have a very different intentional approach. And so when you couple that with some of these other issues, it can be challenging, but for us, that's not in any way an intimidating factor. We were motivated by that. And what's really awesome is, oftentimes when we're finishing coaching or we're finishing leading facilitations and workshops, you'll have folks that maybe start out as skeptics or maybe didn't know what to expect, and now they're fans, right? And that's great, but we don't do it for that purpose.
Right.
But it is great to be able to have folks see a different perspective of those things.
To shift their relationship to the phrase DEI, right?
Yes,
Exactly.
I love the conversion. You guys are like converters.
And I'll say one other small thing really quickly with that too. There's also, in addition to that systemic attack, there's a lot of a misinformation campaign that's going on.
Oh, yeah.
And so, making sure that everyone actually has the same shared language and understanding around these words that are thrown around so frequently. So that's one of those more foundational things, like to get started, let's make sure we're on the same page around these words.
I love that you say that because honestly, my favorite boss was shout out to Netflix, Liz Polk. She told me the first day, she was like, learn the Netflix language. Like, if you don't know the language, you won't be able to communicate with anyone, right? And everybody speaks in acronyms there. So it was just like, thank God she gave me that advice. And it's like similar. You said learn the language. It's like everybody needs to be on the same page. So to make sure we're actually having at least conversations and speaking the same language in that way.
Absolutely.
Okay, only 3 to 4 more questions before lightning round. So you guys are doing a lot, and you have a new baby boy, so you guys have an expanding family. I'm just wondering, how are you managing to balance the professional lives, the personal passions, and the family responsibilities? Because I'm just like, I'm exhausted for you, and I have 1/10 of what you guys are doing right now. So I'm just like, how do you do it?
We're for starters, both of us are fairly type A.
Oh, okay.
And so
that's rare.
Type
too.
A personalities.
Type A
Yeah, that's definitely it.
Structure and organization in that sense,
Yeah. Love that.
But we like being active. We're fueled by community. We're fueled by each other, by the work that we do. I think that's a blessing to be able to wake up and be excited about the work that you do.
100%.
And with that, the energy is limitless, right? So
it's purposeful in that sense.
my
And
God.
we got a calendar on the refrigerator, so we're looking at our phones constantly. What's the day looking like? What's the week looking like? All of this sort of things to ensure that we're getting the things done. And
I love that.
we're doing periodic check-ins. We'll have retreats a couple of times throughout the year to make sure we're meeting our business goals, our marriage, our spiritual goals, financial, all of those things. And so just making sure we're on the same page still.
I love that. And are there any favorite apps that you want to share with anyone?
Shout out to Google.
Google Calendar.
Shout out to QuickBooks. Make
QuickBooks
sure that
we use to manage our business.
manage the business. Exactly.
Yeah,
but we're still at the end of the day, old school, just direct communication goes a long way.
We huddle. We have a huddle every morning, every night.
Wow.
What's on the agenda?
You guys are each other's favorite person.
That part.
So because you guys actually like each other, so I just want to know, what advice would you give to couples who say they want to work together professionally, but they have different personal passions, right? So it's like, how do they? Because you guys seem like, iron sharpens iron, very similar, but there are couples who have such distinct differences,
Yeah. And we we also don't want to overly romanticize our relationship.
Right.
We're also I'm more of the extrovert, he's the introvert. I like social media, he doesn't. There's things for sure that are different, but yeah, I think, we think about this often. The reality is sharing a business is not for everybody. Vince has said many times, you can't be roommates with your friends. You can't travel with all your friends or family. right? Like there's things that you can't do with everybody because it will ruin the relationship.
Yeah.
I think the uniqueness about our relationship is that we met at work, right? And so meeting at work gave us the opportunity to already see how we work together. So we knew going into business wasn't going to ruin our relationship.
I love that.
And you can still have a very deep and meaningful relationship, and it doesn't have to be in that realm. Or maybe, you all are picking each other's brains around approaches.
Yeah.
But, that's one of those things where, you need to be thinking about it at every stage and not just an infatuation period or this or that, but recognizing like if it's challenging or all those things, are you able to carry the weight at any given moment or pick up whatever it may be? And so it's not for everyone, and we recognize that.
But I want to add, though, that even though we do have a good chemistry and it does work for us, even still, we always especially when we're talking to newer couples than us, because we're still relatively new. Right. We have our own therapists. Yep. We have a marriage therapist. We have a personal trainer. We have other friends that we go to. We have our own mentors. We take care of ourselves individually so that when we come together, we are the best version for each other. Yeah. I want to be the best version of myself for him. I don't want to bring him the worst version of me, right? Like I know he'll love me at at that place, but he deserves the best version of me.
Yeah.
So
that's a really good point. I mean, it's kind of like akin to, you may pray together, but you're going to also pray individually, us being very faith driven in that sense. And so whether it's that or, financially, there are a lot of things we're joined around, but we also still have our own finances as well, too. Yeah. So finding and striking that balance, and both can coexist, right? And in some couples, it may need to be completely separate. Right. But when it makes sense and you've reflected on it, then great. But you don't have to force the issue either.
I just can't wait for the book. I feel like that should be right. I'm like, oh yes. I was like, why am I taking nuggets? But this is amazing because it's giving intentionality. It's giving communication. Direct communication is key. Like so many people say that, but you guys are actually practicing it, and it's showing in that form, okay, it actually works if you just speak to each other. Yes. And then what advice would you give to younger professionals who want to pursue careers similar to you, or have other passions as well, like DJing? And I mean, I know you take a creative, you're such a creative, she makes the best decks when we were planning our weddings, guys. I was just are you a wedding planner? What's happening?
I would love to be a wedding planner if I had time.
I mean, you can create a deck and it's actually so detailed, and I'm just how is she doing that? And then basketball for you, I'm just you guys have so many other passions outside of the ones I listed that I'm just what advice would you give to younger professionals? Because they're I want to pursue this, but I also want to have a life. You know what I mean? And it seems like you guys are being those examples, I guess.
Yeah.
Wow, that's such a good question. I mean, it's a very loaded one. I'll probably focus on two things. I think the work-life balance. So for us, this is purpose-driven work. Yeah. And so it doesn't feel like it's work. Right. And so falling into a path where whatever you're doing, that you're passionate enough about that, where it doesn't feel like that. And even when it's something you love and enjoy, having those different changes of pace. We're talking about heavy issues in the world. At any given moment, there's something that can go on in the media that just pulls everyone's heartstrings. We can't deal with that 24/7. Right. And so we have to have outlets. And so finding those healthy outlets that you can lean into at any given moment, so that it doesn't just feel like this is the only thing that matters or the only thing that we're sitting with at any given moment. So just finding that balance, I would say for sure. And again, going back to the point around communication, constantly checking in, right? Because we're in this space right now, but 10 years from now, I pray that we'll continue to be with our business on another level. Yes. But you never know, maybe she's hey, I actually do want to go on a wedding planning now. And DEI is great, and that's going to always be a part of my approach, but that's not what I want to do anymore. Right. And so having that healthy line of communication and those sort of things, in the event that there's a shift,
And now the Libra in me is going to balance out what he just said. I know. And I'm going to say this. Okay. I'm a researcher by trade, meaning I go deep with anything that I do. Ooh. And I believe that there's no cutting corners when it's something that you're really passionate about. And you need to be thorough, right? You want to be the most equipped, the best person to do the job in the room. I've had a lot of times, I think especially as DEI practitioners, people think, oh, well, I'm a person of color, or I'm this, I'm that, I can do it. It's like, this is not just because of the identities that we have. We've done the homework, we've done the research, we've done the practice, we've done the work for free. You know, we've done all of the things to get the proper practice and experience. So we're seasoned at this because we put the time and the work in, and there's just no cutting corners around that. So I think being thorough and being committed is the most important aspect, because otherwise, you know, so many people want to say DEI doesn't mean anything. So when you throw somebody in the game and they're not thorough, that really undermines the nature of what we're trying to do. So I'm a big believer in being thorough.
I love that. It's like it brings up the Malcolm Gladwell's outliers of like the 10,000 hours. You have to put in the time, guys. Like I feel like the generation under us, sadly, you know, have lofty expectations, but I'm like, are you going to do the work?
Right. And I've had students, you know, I do a presentation, a facilitation, and they're like, oh, can I have your slides? I want to do this for my club. I'm like, you can have the slides, but you don't have me in the room. Like I created those slides with intention, right?
Yes, just like that infographic, which we'll put that on the video.
Yes.
But we've gone to the lightning round because we only have like 2 or 3 minutes left, which is crazy that we've gotten through all the questions. Yes. Thank you, guys. So really quickly, this is the time where I just ask 1 to 5 words responses for 1 to 4 questions. Okay. So my passion in DEI comes from, for you, Marissa, go first. Unless Vince wants to go first.
My passion in DEI comes from, I don't know, my own life experience.
Ooh.
Yeah, I was going to say lived experience, empathy, and just wanting to see a better world.
Look at you two. Okay.
Those more words, but okay.
Yeah, we'll take it.
It's like 7.
There's always someone in the
You had 3. You know, it balance out, right?
Exactly. And then do more what? What do you guys want to do more of? Because that's like a loaded question, I know. But like it could be something as, more wedding planning. I don't know. Like do more anything. I know nurturing yourself. I know you guys are both big on self-care and like.
Yeah, I would say do more connecting. And what I mean by that is like, we're at this really beautiful, special place in our life where we have a baby, we just got married, we have, you know, our business growing. We just want to connect on every level possible. We're trying to cultivate like a village around us. So where we can all continue to thrive and like increase the work that everyone else is doing and also connect for the betterment of raising our baby, right? So connecting, that was way many.
Honestly, I don't think I could come with something better than that. So I'm just going to say echo, snap, echo.
Love that. Okay, and then something interesting or a fun fact about you that maybe no one knows. And I'm just like, is there something I don't know about you? But like, I'm sure there's something. There has to be something.
That's a hard question. I you don't count because you know us pretty well. But I'll just say, you know, I present, you know, very strong and all these things. But if there's a big dog that's you're gonna see me terrified, and very, very quickly, no matter how friendly they are, I am gonna crumple. So yeah,
that's true. I experienced that today when Bear saw like our dog. Actually, I love that.
I would say, I mean, everybody knows I still know how to do back handsprings, but I would say on a more serious note, something that we really believe that we have a calling around is like marriage ministry and relationship healing. So we really want to, that's another area that we want to go into in terms of serving other people and working with other folks.
Oh my God, I see it. It's just like right now. Don't you guys see it? That's why I'm like, give me the book. And then lastly, how was your experience on the podcast?
Amazing. This is a whole vibe. Like, I just want to have drinks and hang out in here.
I was like, okay, season 2, I'll have wine for you guys.
Yes.
Because my aunt just launched a wine brand, and I'm like, I was like, you need to sponsor some episodes.
Yes, let's do it.
Well, you got some loving taste testers for sure.
Yes, I love this.
Awesome.
But yeah, So that was our episode.
Thank you, London.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. It's literally my honor. I was like, I could talk to you guys all day, but luckily you guys wrapped it up in the perfect amount of time. And so that's all we have. So let us know. I hope you guys were equally inspired by today's episode, and find out or tune in next week when we'll have another special guest who will show us how cool it is to do more than one thing. After all, we are so much more. Love you guys. Toodles.